Hey folks, Dave here, and I Like Knives, here to talk to you today about the now discontinued Kershaw Pico. It's a very interesting little knife with a blade of just under 3 inches at 2.8, a handle of 4 inches long, and a very slicey little blade at 0.09 inches, and it weighs in at 4.2 ounces. Hollow ground drop point. Now, to give you a little bit more context for what that means, size comparison time. You can see here, measured up against the Rat 1 and Rat 2, that it is just about the same size as the Rat 2. Endura and Delica, once again, about the same cutting edge as the Delica, much smaller handle though. PM2 Para 3, actually a little bit bigger blade than the Para 3, again, a little bit smaller handle. Griptilian and Mini Grip. This mini grip is probably the best size comparison of them all. The blade and the handle length almost exact. Now, one of the biggest gold things about this is going to be that size. Showed you measuring it up against everything else that it falls pretty well in line with a lot of other well-regarded small pieces. And there's not a mistake in that. Just under 3 inches, tends to be kind of the miniature knife, not the miniature knife, but the little brother knife, because it still gives you all the useful blade that you actually need. This is all the cutting surface that is necessary for most of our daily tasks. Combine that with the fact that this is 2.8 inches instead of a straight 3, and that means that it's going to be legal in more places. Some local laws have issues with assisted openings. Check your local laws, blah, blah, blah. But that 3-inch line it's a very common line, and this falls very comfortably under that. So you won't get any kind of problem there. Also, a little bit smaller size makes it very pocketable. Another good thing is that this flipper tab stays out of the way of the pocket clip, so that it is tucked away and won't accidentally trigger in your pocket. One of my favorite quality of life issues that not every budget knife gets right is this right here in the lock bar access. Through my hands, you can see that right there. Very easy to get your thumb in there. Absolutely no question. This is a frame lock, but there's no question about being able to operate it. Even if you're in gloves, that cutout is big enough that your thumb can get in there and do what it needs to disengage. Very easy to work with, as well as the action. Like I said, this is assisted opening, so there is a little bit of help there, but it's very snappy. It's a great opening action, but is not strong enough that it impedes you anyway on the close. So, I mean, you're not going to be able to drop this shut, obviously, but you can still very easily and controlled do it just with the one hand and one finger. Another one of the little things that they got right that Kershaw does not always get right on their budget line is the sharpening choil. Right there, you can see that there's a little cutout there. Plunge line goes in, and the blade stops, and the blade stops clean. Not on all of their budget knives. You can see there's a little bit of extra grind there. They don't always get that grind line right. Here, they nailed it. Absolutely perfect. So what that means is that that's where you sharpen. So if you're on a fixed angled system, or if you're working on a bench stone or anything like that, having that little ricasso, that little cutout right there, will let you be able to sharpen the full length of the blade, as opposed to sharpening 99% of it and having a little bit right here that you can't quite get to. I love sharpening choils, and I like that Kershaw nailed it on this one. Two of the best things about this knife very much go hand in hand, and they are the design and the price. Kershaw is at its absolute best. Not like creating its best work. You know, the launch series doesn't fall under this category. But like as a company mission, I would argue that they are at their best when their aim is to take high-end, crazy quality pieces and bring them to the budget market. And that's what they've done here. This is a less George design. You may recognize it as the Zero Tolerance 900. Sold by ZT, it's like $250, $300. Here, it's $20. That's incredible. And obviously there is a massive quality step down there in build quality and materials, yada yada. Obviously, it's a tenth of the price. It's less than a tenth of the price. But that's still awesome. That's still amazing, because a good design is a good design, irregardless of how much it costs or what all goes into it. It's just a question of how much of its potential are you able to draw out versus how many hands can you put it in. And while this model is more concerned about getting it in hands than the ZT900, it does its job, it does its work, it still cuts beautifully, it's still a nice thin slicey blade, it's still legal, it's still little, it still gives you a great action. I'm not a big fan of assisted opening knives, but this spring is weak enough that it's not going to be so wound tight that it just one day bursts on itself, and also you can very safely operate it. And I don't know if you want to open it two-handed for the lunchroom or something like that. Very, very easy. You get a ZT design for 20 bucks, and that's awesome. Not only that, but there are a couple of places where they absolutely could have cheaped out on and didn't. There are some places that they did, we'll get to that. But they did not cheap out on, for instance, the backspacer. This is something, I don't even know if you can see it properly. This is something that a lot of companies, there it is, that a lot of companies can sometimes overlook. They can put something simple in there. They can put something easy. But Kershaw, I talked about with the spleen, how much I love that backspacer. Here, it's even more designed. It's got texture. It's got cutouts. It's something that they put time and energy and investment into, a very little part of the knife, but it gives it a little bit of extra personality. Not just that, but also right here. Look at that pivot. This is just a T8, regular T8. These are all T6. This is a regular Torx bit, but around it you've got a cool design. Staying with Kershaw, this is Kershaw Vetter, and you can see, very boring. That's also a T8, I believe. But this pivot, they pulled it off the spleen in the Weston. It's the same pivot, and it looks good. It looks like it belongs, and those two things just kind of add into the rest of the design to make it feel like, you know, you're carrying a little bit more expensive piece, a little bit higher quality. Jimping on the back of the blade, not something that they had to do, but it's something that they did. The two-tone, the satin flats, and what I believe to be a stone wash blade, as well as the top swedge here. All little tiny details that they didn't necessarily have to do, but they still were able to put it into a $20 knife. And that's awesome. And that's why I think that's what Kershaw at its best. When it's bringing, you know, high-end, high-quality designs and bringing them to a place where they can get into people's hands. Not everything is awesome, though. There's a little bit of garbage here. And we're going to start right back here at the pocket clip. You may recognize this from a video that I did earlier on the Weston and how this is a terrible pocket clip and I wasn't able to get it off. I haven't tried to get this one off yet, but it is a terrible pocket clip. It's not very good. I love spoon pocket clips. The wider this end is, the more rounded it is, the less dangerous it is to things around you, to, I don't know, car doors, couches, etc., seat belts, whatever. However, look at how absolutely thin this is. There aren't going to be very many pockets that are comfortably able to fit in here, which is upsetting because Kershaw does legitimately good pocket clips. They are capable of it. They just didn't show that here. Although, absolutely props to them on using flathead screws, you know, the correct, objectively correct way to do it. If you're using rounded head screws, then shut up and go away. However, still, when combined with this pocket clip, it's it's still difficult to get in and out of your pocket. It is still very grabby, and I mean, that is a heck of a choke point right there. So, just not a great pocket clip. However, because it is the two-screw design, it's very common. Kershaw does a lot with these. Obviously, ZT would as well because they're sister companies. So it's not a difficult thing to be able to replace this pocket clip if you have a couple of extra knives lying around. So absolutely worth doing that if you're planning on making this your daily carry. I spoke earlier about how great it was that the blade is so small, and that's true. However, it's unfortunate that the handle also has to be so small. Well, that it is so small. I wouldn't argue that it necessarily has to be. And what I mean by that is I wear medium gloves, so I have very mediocre hands. However, the way that this handle is set up with this bulge down here, your grip area is about that long. So let's pull out our handy dandy ruler. I said that the handle length is 4 inches, and I believe that to be true. The grip area, 2.75. It is 2 3/4. There's a whole inch that just isn't for hand. So I can very comfortably get 3 fingers on this. My pinky, though, is right there on that rounded spot, and it wants to fall off. It's uncomfortable to be right there on the butt. What would be the best thing that you could do for this is put a lanyard on it, but I don't like lanyards, so, right? So yes, it's great that this is a small little blade. However, if they had found a way to round this off, to flatten this off just a little bit, maybe not round it off, it's plenty round, but flatten that off a little bit to where your pinky could also fall comfortably within a swell and not be on a point, that would have been a whole lot better. I like the blade size. I do not like the handle size. And, well, the rest of these are just going to be, kind of detractions that come along with hitting that price point. Like I've said, this is a great design, a high-end design made for a budget audience. There's stuff that comes along with that. And one of those is going to be details, materials, and, where you put the effort in. So, Kershaw put the effort into a lot of places where it mattered. They put the effort into the choil, into the blade. This is 8CR13 MOV, by the way. So for, $20, that is absolutely fine. That is good to go. Don't pay like $50 for 8CR. Anyway, at this price point, absolutely fine. They put the effort into the choil, into the blade finish, into the pivot, into the backspacer, into the action. They put effort into a whole bunch of places. They did not put effort into the handle scale, which leaves it being more than a little boring. Unfortunately, this is a very bland knife, and if you have not handled it, you probably have seen it and just don't remember that it exists. It's entirely possible that you have seen thousands of these and it just slipped your mind. It's the Aaron Eckhart of Kershaw knives, which is unfortunate because it puts in a solid effort. Kershaw Pico has never made anything worse. Just because of the handle, it's not easy to see how it makes things better. Missing details. A lot of that is going to come right here on this lock side. So, one of my least favorite things, one of the things that I hate most about a budget frame lock knife, and part of the reason why I don't necessarily like frame locks in general, is this space right here. Let me get out my thingy. There we go. That space right here, I can fit a whole screwdriver between the frame and between the lock bar and the frame, versus this ZT where, again, like this is 10 times the price. So it's not a worthy comparison, but this is. Thank you, brain, for reminding me I had that sitting here. This is the CRKT Pilar, and it's around the same price. And you notice that it doesn't do that. CRKT Pilar does not have that massive a space between the blade. Spleen had that as well. But that's a major frustration for me, and it's just something that comes along with, obviously not always, but usually comes along with a cheaper frame lock. One of the other things that does, not always, but sometimes, is this hole right here. You can see that is where the internal stop pin is. So you see that dot right there. That is the track for the stop pin. However, stop pin can be on the outside and usually is on a higher end knife. On some of Kershaw's lower end, they go internal. The problem, I'm sure that that's cheaper and you can explain to me why it's fine. However, the problem with that is that that hole exists. And because that hole exists, it means that it can get filled with gunk and dirt and mulch and I don't know what it is, tape. I don't know what it is you do with your daily life, but mine can sometimes be a bit nasty. And when that hole builds up and gunks up, well, your blade becomes less secure. That's part of what controls its lockup, which is fine. I mean, it's a flipper frame lock. We know how these things work. No blade wiggle, it's fine. But stuff gets in there, that may not last. It might not always be good, which means that you will have to take it apart. And Kershaw's budget division tends to like thread locker a little bit more than they should. So, it's roulette as to whether or not you end up stripping out screws. I've done that before. Nobody likes that. Going back to kind of the sacrifices, the materials of this. This is 8CR13 MOV blade, which is not a great steel. Stainless steel handles, which doesn't give it necessarily a high-end feel. However, again, for 20 bucks, it is absolutely fine. The problem that incorporates, however, is that this is a thick, thick boy. This is 4.2 ounces for, what? Call it 3 inches. So it's 4 ounces for 3 inches. That's not a great ratio. Count that against the Kershaw, Count that against the Kershaw Weston, which has a little bit bigger blade at 3 1/4. And it weighs less at 4 ounces even. Count that against the Rat 2 with very similar blade length, and it's, what, 2.5 ounces, almost half? Way out of the price range, but count it against a mini grip. Again, almost the exact same size, and again, 2.7 ounces. This is a thick, and it's going to be the same weight as this here Kershaw spleen. Both are 4.2 roughly. It's a thick boy. The reason for that is because of the solid stainless steel handles that have not, flashlight, been milled out at all. You super can't see that. But they haven't been milled out at all because that's something that incurs price. In the end, I am left with a generally positive attitude towards this knife, towards this Kershaw Pico. And that comes for a lot of reasons. It comes because of the ease of use, the lock bar access. This knife could teach classes on how to properly do a lock bar. However, it's got drawbacks. The size is perfect and it nails so many good things and the design was spot on, but it's got drawbacks. The little details were put in, the effort was put in, backspace or pivot collar, but, large portions of it are pretty boring. With all that said, though, all of my complaints are fairly nitpicky. For 20 bucks, it is a solid blade. Long time ago, I made a video about this, and I think the title of it was Kershaw Pico ... perfect knife. And while I no longer feel that way, partially because, I've carried more things, like the mini grip, like the Kershaw Weston, like the Rat 2. I have a little bit more, and the Rat 2, by the way, the mini grip is way out of the price range. The Ontario Rat 2 is absolutely not. With D2 steel, this one's 30 bucks. With just the regular Oz 8, which is a comparable steel, it's still like 20 something. So it's not far away at all. So having more experience as I do than I once did, I now see its flaws a little bit more. I see the corners that were cut a little bit better than I used to. that doesn't take away from the fact that this is a solid knife. If you've got 20 bucks burning a hole in your pocket and you're not sure what else to do with it, this is not a bad place to start. This is not a bad place to put it. It's a solid knife. It'll serve you well. You know, largely I've got no real complaints that matter about this thing. Like I said, it has been discontinued. Honestly, I'm sad to see it go. But as I said earlier, this represents, and it's not even necessarily the best example of it, but it represents something that I so dearly love about Kershaw, and that is incredible designs for budget prices. Their Emerson line is kind of the flagship of this. And I'm excited to see what Kershaw does next. I'm excited to see the next custom maker, the next zero tolerance design that they work with and bring down to the $20, $30 range. I'll be here waiting because they usually don't screw it up. Guys, have a great day. I'll see you soon.